But what I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills I've acquired over a very long career.
Hey, thanks for coming back to the channel. This is an interview that a friend that runs a BJJ academy down and martial arts academy down in Kuala Lumpur did of me back in, when was that? Like November of 2019, pre-COVID madness. I knew David from his days at Gracie China in Beijing when I was doing BJJ and then teaching Aikido after that. So swapping lessons with the teachers there. Great fun, great people, good memories from about 2008 through about 2012, I think, something like that. Anyway, hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
This is the Blueprint Martial Arts podcast, your place to come for interviews and discussion on martial arts in Malaysia, Southeast Asia, and beyond. Hey everybody, this is David from Blueprint Martial Arts in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, here with another episode of the podcast. Now, the first couple have been focused on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because, guilty, that's what I do. But Blueprint really is going to be looking at multiple martial arts. We're going to have martial arts at multiple classes. And I want to learn more and more about all of the martial arts out there. And I want to tap into all of the experience and all of the brains and the great minds from around Asia that have a lot of experience in various martial arts. So I'm very happy today. I'm here with William Sensei, who is a 6th degree black belt in Aikido. So he's got, I'll let him do more of introducing himself, but he's got 32 years in Aikido. He's also got training in multiple other martial arts, which I'm sure he'll take you through. So the focus of today is we're going to be learning a bit about what is Aikido, what's the status of Aikido now, and hearing some very interesting stories, I think, from William, because he has an extensive background and has authored books on the topic of training martial arts in Asia, specifically Japan. William, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, David. It's good to see you again, and thanks for having me on the podcast. You didn't confess that we know each other from training BJJ in China, which was quite fun.
I never like to give up my network. I just
right, exactly.
I just pretend that people show up on my podcast out in the blue, and I just start talking.
Yeah, right. No, those were great days. I mean, I got to basically I was. To back up, I'm from California. I grew up around Asian culture. I had a long-standing interest in martial arts. My father was a little bit against me studying. We had a good judo school when I lived in the Bay Area and a good karate school. But I don't know if it was some lingering thing from World War II or just he thought I would beat up other kids. He didn't want me to do it. I wrestled in junior high school, 7th and 8th grade, which I enjoyed, but then I opted in for team sports. But I still had this interest in martial arts. I don't know why. And ultimately, I had learned about Aikido, had taken a class years ago in the city. And then it was too far to go up in San Francisco. And then started again as I got out of law school in Los Angeles, in Little Tokyo. I knew a guy that had trained there. The place had been built out like something out of 17th century Japan, and not in a fake way. The guy had brought in artisans and built out this loft in downtown LA. And it was interesting, one block in one direction, one block in the other direction. It was like The Walking Dead. It's since been gentrified a little bit, but he had these 2 dogs out front, Michiko and Kuma. Kuma means bear in Japanese, and Kuma would take a bite out of the seat of your pants if he saw any tramps or vagrants coming by, And I started Aikido there. Why? I don't know. It wasn't like, I'm not one of these people that, I saw Steven Seagal and wanted to do Aikido. Not at all. I liked the moral, ethical idea of defending yourself without necessarily injuring your opponent. That was attractive. I'd done some research on it. Aikido basically, it gets a bad rap because it's this bigger thing than just beating somebody in a fight. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, especially now, it's very focused on human development, developing mind, body, and spirit to make better people for society. And it accomplishes this. But always there was this smaller group within that bigger target that were doing it and approaching it as applied martial art, which it still is. The best way to think of it is kind of an interesting stand-up jujitsu. I mean, old jujitsu had 4 phases of fighting. You know, you had tachiwaza, which is standing up. You had hami handachi, which is one guy sitting down, one guy standing up, and he comes over and tries to club him or stab him or whatever. And then you had swariwaza, like in BJJ, we'll start on our knees sometimes. It's a seated technique. You know, you're sitting there drinking tea and someone tries to hit you, stab you, whatever. And then you had newaza, which is laying down, prone position fighting, which is what you're principally doing when you're doing BJJ. Judo has its newaza, you know, wrestling, in a way you could call it that. But for whatever reason, I got started there, and soon I did Muso Shinden Ryu Aikido too, which the Aikido is the art of just drawing, cutting, and returning the sword to the scabbard. It's interesting that you actually take the scabbard off the sword, not the other way around. You know, and I just wanted to find something that was harder than golf. Aikido's really bloody hard, man. And it's great training for your knee, for your legs, and your breathing, and all this kind of thing. Each technique you do, you're supposed to do in one breath. It's pretty deep stuff, and it's kind of Zen-like. And once you practice with a real sword, you got to worry about cutting yourself, and so it has an element of concentration that's above and beyond your.
And how old is Aikido?
Well, that's an interesting question. Ueshiba Morihei, or O-sensei, as we call him, big teacher, he started it basically in the 1930s. It was a synthesis of multiple martial arts. He had studied various types of old jiu-jitsu, and then he had studied some judo as well, and then he had studied Japanese swordsmanship, and you know, he'd been in the army, and then he met a gentleman, Sokaku Takeda, who taught him Aikido Jiu-Jitsu, which was, I can explain a little bit how you differentiate what's the technical difference from a lot of these. But he then synthesized this, and through experiences from being a soldier and from his sort of religious or spiritual interests and pursuits, he came up with Aikido. You could say it's the way of harmony with the force of nature, would be a way of translating it. What's interesting about it is that Jigoro Kano at the same time, or a little bit before that, good ways before that, had started judo. And then suddenly here comes O-sensei talking about all these old things like ki and all this stuff. And Jigoro Kano thought he had sort of collected all of jiu-jitsu in a bottle and taken this technique and that technique, you know, and made judo. And then here comes, you know, O-sensei, a ghost from the past in a way. And Jigoro Kano sent several students to go train with him, you know, some pretty famous people, one of which was Tomiki Sensei, who later wrote or had a big hand in doing the self-defense kata for judo, and some other really, really hard-boiled judoka that went and trained with him, with O-sensei, and then many of them stayed. It's jiu-jitsu that addresses 3 of the 4 phases of fighting that I mentioned: be standing, hami handachi, kneeling and standing, and kneeling. And the last 2 are really retained as training devices, because it's really bloody hard to move on your knees. It makes your legs strong, and you understand your balance, your hip, you understand, you know, it's if you can do it from a kneeling and kneeling in the other guy's standing position, then standing up's a lot easier. It also incorporates concepts relating to the Japanese sword and other weapons, the jo, short staff, which teach you, I mean, it's not LARPing, it's not live action role playing. These things are serious weapons that you can understand spacing and timing. And in the case of the Jo, the short staff, it is really great at stretching out your body and learning how to extend and contract, and understanding distance and spacing, understanding spiral movements, the way you use the Jo in order to strike. And also it develops, Aikido is interesting in that it's not just kind of a standard push-pull jiu-jitsu. It's got this other movement element to it, which is the part that when you experience it, you can't watch a video and understand it. It's impossible. You have to go find someone that really knows what they're doing. And that's harder and harder to find nowadays. I mean, Aikido's like the piano. It's really bloody hard, and not that many people are really good at it, right? But the problem's not the piano. The problem is the guy at the keyboard, or the gal at the keyboard, And Aikido involves, I think now, after doing this for many years, the development of the fascia system. This netting and meat that's not your bones, not your tendons, not your big major muscles. Anatomists are just beginning to understand the role of this in sports. FASCIA. You can look it up, and it's the West is trying to analyze all this, how it works. And I think somehow it develops this other meat in your body, this other tissue, in a way that adds sort of strength and stability. And weapons training, the Jo in particular, I think, has a role in developing this. All this little sort of micro meat, micro muscles in your body. And then they use the boltken, the wooden sword. And again, there's hand movements in Aikido that are really good. I mean, I think if you combine BJJ with Judo and Aikido, that's a very good self-defense kind of foundation.
Okay. To follow up on that, and maybe we just cover this quite briefly, because there's much more I want to talk to you about in terms of your history, and you've had a very you have a very interesting life. Sorry, I spoke about you in the past tense accidentally there. Sorry. Why did Aikido? So a lot of the debates you get around martial arts now, the way I look at it, they're driven by one factor. If you had to take one variable and say what gets spoken about in one way versus another, it's whether a martial art has been taken up as a key component or exemplified by a practitioner in the context of mixed martial arts.
Correct.
And initially, BJJ was quite important in early, let's say MMA from the start of the early 90s, where there was some MMA before that, but it was the start of the mainstream movement. And for the longest time, everybody thought karate was BS because, oh no, the guys in the UFC don't do it. Then Lyoto Machida came along and started decimating.
Machida's killing people, right? He's just,
So why, in your opinion, is it just happenstance, or is there a deeper practical or philosophical reason as to why Aikido hasn't been brought into the umbrella of mixed martial arts?
Yeah. Well, I think that to do mixed martial arts, if you really want to do it, you need a strong chin, you need a strong body, you need about a few years of wrestling, maybe a few years of BJJ, and then some MMA modified boxing, and maybe some Muay Thai. You're looking at about 5 years of hard training if you're a good athlete and you can already do it. Aikido takes a lot longer to learn than that. I do think if you wanted to take, I talk about this, if you wanted to take certain techniques from Aikido, you can see them. There's the one where a guy gets his arm broken in an MMA fight. It's Ude Kimenage. It's you kind of reach across, grab the guy's wrist, reach across and grab his arm behind the tricep on the other side and yank him forward, breaks this guy's arm. But you can take certain principles from Aikido and adopt them to mixed martial arts contests of any kind. First of all, mixed martial arts isn't new. It's not a new idea. Japanese have this idea. It's called Sogo Budo, which is a composite martial art. This idea of combining different techniques from different martial arts. So there's a lot of in my view, selling of old rope as new within the whole mixed martial arts, phenomenon. But that's good. It's a framework for people to have sporting contests. I think philosophically, some people that look at O-sensei's, philosophy of, is this the best, highest use of the art of peace, which is some people call Aikido this, to adapt it to match fighting. Well, maybe not. But then I also know teachers that have fought matches before. So, it's, I think, to each his own. I think it's a very big tent. And if you wanted to, and you did Aikido for a long time, it's a great platform for learning other martial arts because it's technically complex. It teaches you to be flexible and strong. It conditions the body, like your whole body from all the falling all the time, becomes stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. It's a great platform upon which to then bolt on your composite martial art to then do MMA if you wanted to. I think that some people don't like the idea, hey, what's all this peace, love, and understanding stuff, right? What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Elvis Costello. And the world's increasingly narcissistic and nihilistic, and so everybody on the internet, it's such a lovely, happy place.
Yeah.
The internet. Oh, that's bull, you know what?
Time there as possible.
Yeah, so I think that's probably what it's about. And at the end of the day, I mean, look, it's changed a lot. I haven't been in the world headquarters a bunch recently. It's totally different than when I got there. We had a bunch of super strong guys with a real big talent drain on it. We just beat the snot out of each other, right? I throw you 4 times as hard as I can. You throw me 4 times as hard as you can. Do that for an hour. It's not a whole lot of fun, but it changes your body, that's for sure, and how much you can endure. But some people, like I said, it's a very big tent. I divide it into 3 camps, actually. What I say is, and it'll probably get me in trouble, I say there's Aiki cosplay, which is people that like to wear Japanese clothes and kind of, they get together and they go in a circle and fall down, and then Aiki Undo, which is sports or exercise, just 1, 2, 1. So they're kind of doing the technique. So you have to understand fundamentally what is Aikido practice. It's the drilling of martial arts techniques to develop you as a human being, okay? Mm-hmm. And so if you do kind of what I say, Aiki Undo or Aiki exercise, you're going fast, but it's highly cooperative and it's just exercise. As a martial art, it doesn't have much meaning. And the last one would be, number 3 would be like Aikibudo. It's your interest is in applied martial arts. But I think that, especially nowadays, this is an issue from all martial arts. All martial arts are ultimately, they are not, they're elitist. They're not egalitarian. They're egalitarian that everybody can try them. They're elitist in that not everybody can be good at them. It's sort of a pyramid like this. Everyone can participate, but not everybody can be really good at it. So in short, to your question, I think philosophically, the notion of people adopting Aikido to do that, some people reject. I think secondly, it takes a long time to understand it. I also think it's really good for understanding spacing and timing, particularly the weapons work. Because the weapons, a bolt can, a wooden sword, or a jo is much faster than someone's fist or someone's hand. I mean, fist or foot, right? Much faster. And, if you're doing it in earnest, you don't get out of the way, you're going to hit in the head. There's like a real threat of serious harm when you're training. You have to be super careful. So it has it's quite easy if you did it for years to turn around and then apply it to martial arts. And the ukemi, it has this other flip side to the art where I'm learning how to receive the technique. And people misunderstand that. People think it's just kind of a dance. It's just, he's falling down now, kind of LARPing. But actually what should happen is I should give him a certain type of energy at first so he or she can train. And depending on the person, I give them just enough power that it's worked for them. Imagine if you were doing BJJ drilling and it was at the beginning, I'm just letting you drill and do the drill. Then over time, I slowly increase the amount that I'm sort of blocking you from doing the drill, right? but you get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger until you can do it if I try to block you or not, you know?
Yeah.
And that's really what's going on in Aikido practice. People misunderstand it. And then the idea of receiving, ukemi means to receive, okay? So when I'm receiving the technique, okay, I get it. I'm stronger than you. I can block you, right? But what if I'm not? Or what if you get it off on me and then now I'm gonna get my arm broken? So then I learn how to receive it safely. And why? It's not so we have this capitulation on the mat. I'm looking for, it's the art of recovery. I screwed up somehow and you got me. So now I'm trying to recover so I can then turn the table on you and do something back to you, right?
Could you break down for me a little bit, what do you mean by a applied martial art? So, and what versus what?
Well, I would say that applied martial art, I mean that you would use it in a confrontation of some kind. I break confrontations down into two things. One is an actual physical confrontation anywhere. It could be anywhere, outside, inside, wherever. The second would be in some sort of match fighting, like you mentioned. Yeah, of course, you could adapt things from Aikido. All the handling of striking, you could easily adapt Aikido to then a different type of attack. You just study the spacing and timing. You can use the same principles. What do you do in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu? Maintain the distance, close the distance. Aikido has very excellent footwork for learning to close the distance. And this came from sword fighting, right? You couldn't leave that much space. He's coming, you want to enter and cut the guy. So I would say that an applied martial art to an actual human confrontation where there's either is the potential of violence or violence. That's what I would say in terms of applied martial art or a sporting context. I mean, let's face it, Kendo is a martial art. Are you going to adapt it to MMA? No, although if you studied Kendo, the Shinai is so fast, it would really be great training for your eyeball to then recognize and pick up movement. So that's an application of Kendo to what you're doing. So that's really what I mean. In Japanese, you say oyo waza. And oftentimes the way you'll train something to drill it into a beginner is not the way you'll necessarily then ultimately go to apply it. One example would be, as I'm teaching you in the beginning, I might teach you a much more static form, a much more classical form, a much more kind of a bigger movement than I would if I was going to apply it myself. In fact, when I'm teaching Aikido, I have the Aikido I teach my students, and I have my own, which would be what I would use. And I use the first one is designed to develop something inside the student and to get them to begin to understand the concept. You know, you don't want to blow someone away with Rachmaninoff when they can't even play chopsticks on the piano, right? You understand what I mean?
Absolutely.
I just launched this new YouTube channel, Aikido Applied. I'm not trying to do highly choreographed videos, but I'm showing things, and there's an example on there. There's a technique called kaitenage, which just means rotary throw, and you'll see I'll do it very classically the way you would teach someone, and then I do a very abridged version the way you would just apply it on someone really fast.
We got through to your journey. You were about to leave for Japan, so when did you get to Japan, and what did you learn while you were there?
Well, it's interesting because I was working as a trial lawyer in California. I mean, I was making back then $175,000 a year in like 1997 or something like that. You know, in current dollars, that's not too bad. And I was training in the downtown LA dojo. I had prestige as a assistant instructor in that school. You know, and LA is not a bad place to be for martial arts, but I'd been to Japan twice, and I decided if I wanted to teach as a non-Japanese, I needed to go live there. And so I had one other thing. I write about it in the book. I had a fraternity brother in college die climbing Mount Fuji. I had gone to visit twice before. This is an interesting story. It's in the book. I didn't say it. When I moved to Japan, I actually wrote a story about my experience. It's called Aikido in Japan and the Way Less Traveled. When I moved, I had a lot of money in the bank. And I decided I was just going to go there and train, see if I liked it. If I liked it, I would stay. And I had met some guys. There's a lot of foreigners there, you know, in the kind of the foreign ghetto around the dojo. Now Japan's so accessible now. If you want to go, go. When I went there, you couldn't use an ATM machine. I had to go down to the Visa card shop. So all these ladies in their pink little uniforms giggling when the big white monkey walks in the door, you know, and then, oh my God, the big white monkey has not one credit card. He's got 4 credit cards. Oh, you know, and I had to take money out on my credit card, get all my cash for the month because I couldn't use a bloody ATM, you know? Yeah, it was hilarious. And so I had other friends, the Canadians. I was hanging out with like the Western Canadian mafia. These guys, they're all working class guys. And we got on, even though I was a lawyer, because it turns out they go, we know why we liked you. You drove a beer truck when you were in university for your summers. So you understand hard labor. I said, yeah, that's probably it, you know. And I hung out with these guys and they helped me. I had to go to Akihabara, which is a famous electric town in Tokyo, and buy all my kit for the apartment. You know, back then to get a phone was like, good Lord, you know, the amount of money and paperwork you had to do that. Got set up with a little apartment where I had tatami mats, like 6 tatami and fusuma, sliding doors and the whole thing. I didn't go live like an expat. I just wanted to live really raw and simple. And I write about this in the book and kind of give up all the comforts of life that I had. I had a car, you know, a nice car. I had a nice flat. I had a great job. I had all this stuff. I was just like, my buddy had died climbing Mount Fuji like an idiot. He climbed in March where it's still covered in ice. Big guy too. He's about 6'2" and about 200 pounds. And they were getting up toward the summit and he put his ice axe in the ice, stood up to take a photo, boom, gust of wind. Down the hill he goes, like 3,000, you know, I don't know, 3,000 feet or something, just tumbling because it's just a big ice sheet during that year. And I then still went to Japan. This is 94. And I traced his steps. I write about this in the book. The chapter's called Climb Every Mountain. Every chapter in the book has each chapter has 2 names, one in Japanese and one in English. And it's structured like this. There's a prologue about me moving. Then it's winter, spring, summer, fall. What happens inside the world headquarters every year? Home dojo, right? Which is the home dojo, the world HQ. And then what happened to me? And I take the piss out of myself through the whole thing. I mean, I laugh at myself. You have to, otherwise, you know, my Japanese teachers will they won't like it much. But it was funny. A lot of funny shit happened. I got a great story. You used to have to pay for the. You used to have to pay for NHK TV, like the TV charge in Britain, right? And this guy would come by the door and ask you for the NHK, and we're like, we're foreigners. We got, you know, my Japanese wasn't very good at that time. I can turn on NHK, but I don't understand a word of it. So my one buddy, this big chubby Canadian guy, the NHK guy keeps coming back. My friend keeps hiding his TV every time the guy comes back, and he's looking like, I know you got a TV. So my friend just whips open the door, stark butt naked, and says, "Irashai," like, come in. And this guy, he never came back again. So he inspired me because the guy kept coming back and asking me. And so finally one time he was coming, I hid my TV and I looked at him and I said, I was straining for the words and I went, Nihongo tabimasen, which means I don't eat Japanese language, right? It is hanasemasen, means I can't speak. But I said, I don't eat Japanese language. And the guy just went like, oh, this guy's too much trouble. Never came back again. But we used to do wild stuff. You know, next to the dojo, people always say, oh, you know, Aikido doesn't have matches. But Kabukicho is right next to the dojo, which is a big Yakuza area. Before it was kind of off limits. You try to go into these places. And, you know, they say, no gaijin, no gaijin. Now it's become more of a tourist attraction. But back in the day, I mean, that's full of Yakuza. Go ahead.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, man. It's full of Yakuza. And so the teachers used to go down there and drink when they got out of class and get in fights all the time. That's how they learned how to do applied martial arts. And, wow. Yeah. I mean, you got to watch yourself because, I mean, I had a problem I got into a bit of mischief when I was living in Japan that year, which wasn't the smartest thing to do. But one time a friend of mine it's in the book, I won't ruin it, but basically if they get to their telephone, if they can reach back and grab their phone and get to their phone, you're going to be surrounded by like 40 people. And we took down a guy that wasn't just a kumicho, your typical, you know, kind of low-level guy. This guy, he wasn't a typical chimpira. He was a kumicho, like a higher level, moving up the ranks boss. And this guy had punched my friend, and we just jumped on him or whatever. But then the cops came. It was a big mess. It's a story in the book. You asked me about Aikido. One thing I liked about it from self-defense perspective is that it allows for a proportional response. Like I'm doing Muay Thai, and I think the guy's a threat. Wham! I kick him in the leg. Oh, geez, I was just asking you what time it was, right? You know, Aikido has that's why the police and special forces, a lot of people use it, you know. So there's other objectives inside the dojo rather than just a physical confrontation, just a fight, right? If you're just going to do, you know, like judo matches or boxing matches, that's fine. That's what you're going to do. Just focus on that. You don't need all those other things. But I think the goal of martial arts was to shape the human being as well. And I think where it ran into trouble and what people in the West started going, that's, you know, bullshito or whatever, was that as it became accessible to more people and people are trying to sell it, it starts to lose some of its essence. You see, it starts to lose some of its vitality. Why? Because you have to lower it to make it possible for people to do. You see, my teacher told me that a guy he trained with in Japan, he had changed his weapons practice. So it was more like 1 and 2, because before it had just been like, bam, 1. And it's too hard for people to do. Okay. And so this is a whole nother topic. We could have another topic on this about, are you being sold something? Are you being taught something? You know, and what are you really studying? What are you doing? You know, and why? These are all important questions to ask. I did BJJ because it filled in I felt a gap in my training. And I did judo for the competition. And I would say that with judo, I didn't do it that seriously, but I was in the classes and the teacher used me he'd throw me all the time. I'm the oldest guy in the class by 20 years, and you guy's a monster. I used to do that at the Roger Gracie Academy. Anyway, so
you've trained in a lot of different disciplines. You obviously have a very, I'd say, holistic view of martial arts, what they are, what they're for.
Right.
One of the things in martial arts that I think is a very useful thing, but at the same time can be an incredibly toxic thing, is belt systems.
Right.
And I know Aikido, correct me if I say anything incorrect here, but where it does have belts, it really only has 2, which is white and black, and then it has a different system in between. Does that hinder Aikido, particularly in terms of keeping younger people, children, going back to it? Does that lack of visible progression hinder it, do you think?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because in my kids' class, I've adopted giving them different color. Well, some people give different colored belts. I do, and I borrowed something from BJJ. They get 2 stripes before I don't give 4 stripes. I just give 2 before their next test. I think that little cookie of, you know, progress. I think that, you know, you look at Aikido, it's very old and traditional, and it's kind of something that a lot of people nowadays, especially with iPhones and instant gratification, you know, and self-determination and all these things, it's swimming against the tide with some of these things.
That's right. So I'm in my 30s now, and I will not reveal your age, but you're older than your 30s. Right. So if you were going to relive your martial arts journey, what's one thing that you would have done differently in your 30s?
That's interesting, because that's, you know, when I was training in downtown LA and then going to Japan. I think that in your situation, I mean, I think that when you hit, this is something I did do when I hit 40, you have to start to train smarter. And I've seen this recently, that people are still trying to train hard the way they did in their 20s and 30s. And then when you get into your 40s and 50s, you're just busting your body up. You have to train. I use the analogy of a spinning top. You have to figure out how to maintain the vitality, the spin, as long as you can. And I think in your 30s, you still need to train as hard as you physically can. I think in terms of other arts, I've really tried to focus on one thing and learn it really well and not end up a jack of all trades and master of none. So I would concentrate on learning one thing well. And I think that, although in your case, I would probably study judo from someone good, if you can find someone. And there's not a whole lot left. I would just find the best teacher you can possibly can. That's the most important thing. That's what I was talking about Aikido in China. I really feel for them because it's so hard for them to learn. You know, I would find the best teacher you possibly can and you just steal everything you possibly can. And I think that my time in martial arts, and Japanese martial arts are heavily influenced by Zen, and, you know, don't waste 1 minute of your life. I would just, you know, again, getting back to the idea of you know, doing the right thing at the right time at the right, you know, place. And I think that, you know, if you apply this idea of using martial arts to polish yourself as a person, it makes your life a lot more interesting. You're constantly looking for incremental improvements in yourself. And I think that I would just train consistently. You're going to be 40 anyway, right? You might as well be 40 with your whatever belt you got and whatever martial art you got under your belt. I would focus intensively on fundamentals. I would just cut my head off and train, to borrow the old analogy. I would not focus too much on belts or the results necessarily. I would just really focus on the day-to-day training. I can tell you from experience, you read my book, some of the things my wife and I have gone through, with her getting ill in Japan is how we ended up in London. You know, you have no guarantee of the next day or the next day after that. So you might as well enjoy very deeply and intensely whatever you're experiencing right in that moment. And martial arts are good at grounding you in the moment, I think.
Excellent. I think that's as good a way to sign off the main part of this podcast. Just very briefly before we go, plug your stuff. Where can people online? Where can people buy your book?
You can find this on Amazon. Much to my surprise, it still remains, if you type in Aikido, on the first or second page of all books or all things for sale on Amazon. Shocks the hell out of me too. After 4 years, I think it's interesting that you can pick it up and put it down. It's all about my experience in Japan, but they're discrete stories, and there's a lot of funny stories in there and a lot of interesting things about Japanese culture. I have a really detailed history about Japanese moving to Brazil on the ship, was the Kasato Maru in 1908, and taking their martial arts with them, and what are the roots of BJJ and where does it come from. And then it also explains why Aikido is practiced the way it's practiced and how it's supposed to be practiced. And then please take a look at as a Facebook page online. You can look at that, Aikido in Japan. And then look at my new channel I'm making on YouTube called Aikido Applied.
William, it's been absolutely awesome. Thank you so much.
And great to talk to you, and bless you and your family, man. I will endorse your podcast highly on my online social media.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
If you're involved in martial arts in Malaysia, Southeast Asia or beyond, or indeed any other related field and would like to come on the podcast as a guest, then please do get in contact with us. You can email us at info@blueprintmartialarts.com. Likewise, if you're an individual or company with a product or service that you would like to promote and you'd like to sponsor the show, please contact us at the same email. That's info@blueprintmartialarts.com.